Hello, Singletrack Society. This is Dave Weens, just doing a little introduction to our webinar that we held last Friday, October 16th. We were a little stiff at times, just getting used to that technology. Did a little editing, edited out some of the glitches. Just something about more trails close to home. I finished up another Zoom call today at 5 p.m., ran down to the basement, got on my stuff. I'm out here, it's a little before 6. Having more trails close to home is fantastic for our heads, for our bodies, for our communities. Thank you for your support. I hope you enjoy this webinar. Contact myself or Patrick Kell anytime. We'd love to hear from you.
Before that, I was immersed in local advocacy and really have been involved in trails in one way or another since I first started riding back in the mid-'80s. As many of you have too, I know. I'd like to introduce a few other folks on the call. We've got our CEO, Mcneil, on the call.
Hello, everybody.
From our board, we've got board chair Chris Conroy, who's also going to be going to pose a couple of questions to him a little bit later. And Jim Grover, are you on the call? I'm sorry, I can't see every name of everybody on the call, so I'm going to have to just take some steps. So we may have Jim Grover, Ernie Rodriguez, and Jimena Flores, all from our board. Any of those board members out there that I didn't see an RSVP for and I have missed? Excellent. Usually our colleague Patrick Kell, many of you know Patrick, would be on this call, but he's back in Ireland, so it's late in the evening there, so Patrick gives his best to everybody, but he won't be on the call today. I guess I was telling a little story about my riding last night, but we just want to talk a little bit about what COVID has been like, at least from my perspective. It's been an opportunity for me and a lot of people I've talked to maybe actually ride their bikes a little bit more if they had trails. And it really underscored the value of having more trails close to home for both my wife, Susan, and I know a lot of our friends that live in this area. We've got 2 trail systems quite close. And as I mentioned before, it's before work, it's at lunch, and it's after work. And then since we weren't traveling as much for business or for other reasons, Susan and I were able to escape quite a bit. But we would just stay very local, and it was all social distancing because there was just the 2 of us, but we got around our part of the state a good bit and did some riding in the San Juan Mountains, got over into the La Salles of Moab back in June. We got a sneak peek at the Palisade Plunge, the last 15 miles of a new trail that's going into Grand Junction, a fantastic trail that hopefully everybody gets a chance to check out at some point. And I also did a 3-day bikepacking trip. Hadn't done any bikepacking before. So Susan was on call at the hospital, and that's essentially a bit of a hall pass for me on Labor Day weekend. So I figured out the bikepacking thing and had a really fun time doing that. It's hard. It's very hard to ride a bike that has 30 pounds of gear and food and water on it, but also very, very rewarding as well. So I just want to talk a bit about the Singletrack Society, and a lot of you are very familiar with it. Some of you are newer to it, but it's really about leadership, and everybody on this call is a leader in their own right. The society represents the community of leaders, and you guys are enthusiastically willing and capable of evangelizing work. We're also gaining more tools and mechanisms for you to help us in that, and we certainly appreciate that. It's a big part of how powerful the Singletrack Society can be. Advocacy is a huge part of it, and you guys have been active at the grass tops level and champions for Imba on our policy work. Some of you have been to Washington, D.C. with us. Others of you work with your local organizations on these fronts. And it's very powerful in how important this is to moving trails and mountain biking forward. Of course, the philanthropy, we couldn't do the work without the generous personal commitments and the investments. And then the community is very important. I was just at an event, but I did a ride this past weekend in the Moab area. There happened to be 4 Singletrack Society members there, along with a larger crew. And that was just a small sort of version of the larger events that we had scheduled for this year. In fact, this weekend coming up would be the Bentonville event that has been canceled. And we had to cancel the Park City event earlier. But hopefully in 2021, those events will be back online. And we've seen just tremendous value in connecting Singletrack Society members from all across the country, and the friendships made, and the writing that we do, and the ideas that get exchanged, and how those ideas, can turn into, tangible benefits for Imba, and how, we put all of our heads together, we can really, come up with some great things and move the needle for mountain biking. And finally, recognition. We're happy to recognize our Singletrack Society members, and it's important as we're able to do that, and it certainly influences others to join us. And we're seeing a great uptick in the Singletrack Society, and we want to see that continue to move forward. So we're just going to have some fun talking about important opportunities for mountain biking. We're in a very interesting time right now, much different than what we've seen in the past, and we're really excited about it. So Imba's building momentum. Membership is really strong. We weren't sure what to expect when the pandemic first happened, and things got a little quiet for a while. But I think all around the country, people realized the value of trails, and our membership drive in the spring, blew the 2019 drive out of the water. A lot of people really appreciated getting out, appreciated the work local organizations were doing. So right now, the membership is as strong as it's been for a couple of years, which is fantastic. And we're in the middle of our fall membership drive as well. And on the trail building side with our Trail Solutions crews, same thing, an initial sort of stoppage of work, couldn't travel, and a lot of uncertainty about what was going on. And then midsummer, the spigot really started to crank up. And now it feels like we're back in even past a busy time to where the cold calls are coming in. There's tons of interest from all around the country and beyond in new trails and new trail development. And the entire trail building industry is, they're back on their toes, and there's more work than the whole industry can do in many months, if not a year, looked out that far. The pandemic has showed us there is a remarkable demand for trails, and additionally, an incredible demand for mountain bikes. And we've seen that in the bike boom that's taken place. And Chris Conroy, our board chair, the president of Yeti Cycles, will talk a little bit more about that. And additionally, we're seeing people completely rethinking lifestyles and a bit of a shuffling of the deck. I know we're seeing it in this valley. We're seeing a lot of relocation to the Crested Butte area and to Gunnison. I know it's happening in similar towns all across the West. And people are leaving places like the Front Range of Denver and coming up here. And then people are backfilling them just as quickly from places like Chicago and New York. And I think medium-sized cities all across the country are seeing an influx of folks, Roanoke, Pocatello, Idaho, Bozeman, Montana, places like that, Grand Junction, Colorado. The use is just off the charts. And one example of that would be a place called Draper City in Utah, the Corner Canyon Trail System. They've got good counters there, great electronic counters. And they have seen, in some places, they saw up to an 800% increase in use, but a steady 100 to 200% increase in use on the trails in that area. And that's from walkers, that's from runners, that's from mountain bikers, the whole ball of wax. And we're hearing the same story all around the country. So our More Trails Close to Home focus, which we've been on for a couple of years, certainly has been validated many times over. And, we aim to influence and be a catalyst for 250 mountain biking trail communities coming online by the year 2025. And we think that's a very attainable goal. And an important part of this is operating from what we call the ecosystem framework. And if any of you had a chance to open the attachment that you got with your email, and I see the slide up now, you should have this attachment to your email. But really, every new trail development that happens out there goes through certain stages and has to check certain boxes, and that's what we call the ecosystem. And the very beginning would be vision. Someone has to be the vision, the trail champion, to even get the idea off the ground, and then it moves quickly into having access for any piece of property, whether it be public lands or land trust lands or municipal lands. That access piece is critical. The education component really runs throughout the entire ecosystem. Education is needed at every different stage of the trail development process. So it's not just a box that you check, but it's an ongoing part of it. The assessment is where a community is at the moment and also where they could possibly be. And Imba has a wealth of knowledge in that area. And working right into that is the planning and design. And where a lot of trail systems sort of developed in a haphazard fashion in the past, now we're putting a really heavy emphasis on the importance of proper planning and design. And we can talk more about that, but it really enables everybody out there, whether they're mountain bikers or trail runners or walkers, if it's a mixed use system, to have a great experience. And then the funding piece is really important, and we can talk more about that as well. Professionally built trail is becoming more and more the choice. I mean, we have hybrid builds too, which is a combination of professionally built and volunteers. There's still some 100% volunteer built systems out there. The kind of trail development that we envision is really going to require the trail building industry, and that requires funding. But it's not unlike building swimming pools and rec centers and ice rinks and concrete infrastructure. It's the same thing, and when we get municipalities and counties and states and different entities looking at trails the same way they look at other pieces of infrastructure, the price tag on trails is actually quite a bargain, but it's certainly more than a lot of clubs are used to spending. So one of the things that's happened on the funding side is the Great American Outdoors Act, and if you guys have been reading our emails, you're aware of this, or even just watching the news. It doesn't get the prime time slots these days, but it was a very important piece of legislation that the president signed, and it fully funded the Land and Water Conservation Fund at $900 million a year. And the Land and Water Conservation Fund, or LWCF, has been around for 50 years. It's only been funded to that level twice in that 50-year history. Now it's going to be funded to $900 million every single year in perpetuity. So it's up to us to figure out, and I'm sorry, this $900 million is royalties from offshore oil and gas drilling, and it's earmarked for outdoor recreation. So there's plenty of things that fit under outdoor recreation, but trails certainly are one of those. And Imba is working hard to dig into LWCF to understand how the money is distributed both federally and to the states, and how we can make sure that mountain biking and trails can get a sizable chunk of that money every year. And that's just one funding mechanism and opportunity that's out there. There's certainly more. The create side of the ecosystem, that's actually relatively easy. It's hard work, but once you get there, that means you've got the access, you've got the planning and the design, you've got the funding. So I consider that one to be one of the easier boxes. Then finally, wrapping it all up is stewardship, and that's just where we, take care of these trails, make sure they're maintained, organize the volunteers, and that just kind of brings the whole process together. So that's the what we call the ecosystem approach. Every trail system, really, if you look at it from start to finish, it's gone through this process. Depending on what type of a system it is, it may have there may have been more or less work in certain areas, but all of those boxes have needed to get checked along the way. And Imba is, nobody else really focuses on the entire ecosystem, and that's what it takes to get trails on the ground. It's a very complex process, and that's where Imba really focuses its work, is helping communities through the entire process. Right now, we're going to switch gears just a little bit, and I'm going to introduce Chris Conroy. Chris Conroy is our board chair, has been for 9 years. Unfortunately, he's going to term off, and we're going to lose him, at least as the board chair. But he's the president and one of the owners of Yeti Cycles, fantastic brand, and great supporters of Imba and advocacy. and they also support other efforts. And Chris, are you on the phone here or on the line?
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, thanks for being here. What are you seeing in the industry with COVID and other things that have been happening in the world? Just give us a quick synopsis.
Yeah, you bet. So obviously when COVID started, everybody was, kind of in a bit of a panic, not just because of the public health issue, but also because we had to shut down our businesses for, in Colorado, it was for a couple of weeks, and then that extended. One of the things we were fortunate about doing is, we have a staff that assembles bikes, and we kind of flipped our effort over to making PPE. So we stamped out shields and made 20,000 shields during that early time when we really had nothing else to do. And was hoping that things would roll around, and kind of April in the bike business was still pretty grim. May it really started picking up, and by the time we got into June, we're setting records in every category. We saw that first happen in the industry with kind of lower end bikes, people getting back into the industry, as you talked about earlier, getting the whole family out on bikes. And that quickly migrated up to the category that we kind of play in, high-end mountain bikes, and really hasn't let up. It's one of those strange things that you kind of knock on wood and feel very fortunate when stuff like this happens in a difficult time, because we know it isn't that way for a lot of people. So we just kind of knock on wood and say, yes, the industry is having a boom. And this is an industry, to be frank, that rarely has booms. It's been pretty steady for the last. There's a retailer shaking his head there, and Kent, knowing that, we're usually fighting for every bike sale with the same market share. So we're just swapping market share back and forth. So it's been really fortunate. It's been cool to see having people that have been riding bikes for a long time getting back out, and that was, we could see that, one with dealer feedback, and secondly, you get out on the trails and you see people and they're just so stoked to be on the mountain bike, and that's something that, if you've ridden a mountain bike a long time, you can kind of get a little jaded to. But the enthusiasm and how excited they are about mountain biking, to me, is the real success story here. And if we can keep those riders in the ecosystem, I think it does a few things. One, I think it creates a bigger need for more infrastructure. We just need more trails, right? And I also think that when more people are out riding and enjoying the trails, they also know what's important to them. So I think it helps us, politically as well, where they fight for trails in their own backyard. So that's kind of a quick synopsis of where the industry is and how I think it kind of affects trail building.
Awesome. What are you seeing on the trails around you in Golden, Colorado? I know it's a busy system. You've got the Denver metro area right there. What's the difference been?
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting. I think that, right as this happened and people didn't have anywhere to go, they were getting out quite a bit. And, we would see, I live up in Evergreen, which is just up in the mountains from Golden. And, you would see everything. And I think one of the really encouraging things is, this is usually, very homogenous sport. And the diversity of people we saw on the trails was super cool, right? So we saw a lot of different kind of trail users than we typically see. And that's not just on mountain bikes, that's kind of overall. Once school, I guess, got back into session, whatever that means these days, we've definitely seen the trail usage go down a bit, just because I think people are occupied with homeschooling their kids, if they're not taking them to school and going back to work. So definitely it's tailed off a little bit. I'm not sad about that, because fall is the best time in the world to ride a bike. So we're making sure to make good use of that.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Just any quick ideas on how the spike in use could be positive or negative for trails going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it could be both, right? I mean, as soon as you have more usage, especially in Colorado, we've had a really dry back half of the summer. And so, I ride trails that I haven't ridden in a little while and jump back on them, and it feels like it's a completely different trail where I used to know every rock on that trail, right? So I think the impact with the weather, the fires, a lot of the kind of eco disasters that are kind of hitting at the same time, is making the need for more trails, more resources to keep those trails running even more important. So we have some groups on the Front Range with Comba, who does a fantastic job, and the Giddy Up guys, and they're out there maintaining the trails all the time, and I think they're working really hard just to stay ahead of the trail maintenance. And then fortunately, we have a bunch of other trail projects locally that are happening, that are expanding our trail network in places that we haven't ridden our bikes before. So that's really cool.
That's fantastic. Chris, thanks a lot. Everybody, we'd love to be able to open this up to questions, but I think with a group this large, we would just continue to be talking over each other and never really get anything done. But I am going to do something we do in our Singletrack Society events, and I'm just going to pick on a few people for a little bit, and I want to hear a little bit about what you're experiencing where you live. How about Bill from Albuquerque? I saw you earlier. Bill, can we get audio from you?
Hi, Dave. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
I'm in Albuquerque here. We've had exponential use of the trails, I'd say. I have 3 or 4 different areas I can ride in. 2 weeks ago, I was in an area and I was seeing groups of like 7 or 8, including kids. I never used to see that in that particular area. And so it's a great thing to see. Of course, we always like to have the trails all to ourselves, right? So, there's kind of a trade-off on it. But I think like everybody else, we're in drought here, and I'm starting to see the trails deteriorate a little bit. And so, with drought and then increased trail usage, that's kind of where we're at here in New Mexico.
Excellent. Thank you. So why don't we head over to Philadelphia and see what Elizabeth and Sean Sweeney can tell us about their experiences on the trails in Pennsylvania. Hi, guys.
We're fortunate we can ride to the trail from our house. So we've been riding a lot of Belmont Plateau, which is part of Wissahickon and whatnot. So it's been nice. And one of the nice things the city did proactively, talking about multi-use and things, we actually closed an entire one of the West River drives to allow more people to maybe stay off the trail itself and more like for the jog strollers and walkers and things of that nature to use that. And that's been very effective. So when we ride, we take part of that to the trail itself, and we see tons and tons of people out there. So that's been useful. And I think through some local advocacy, at the city level, they're looking to make that, as permanent as possible. So that, these are maybe some models that other communities can consider about, opening or closing parts of streets or larger parts to allow more people access to trails or as an alternative to trails. So that's nice. And interestingly, I think everyone's heard, but, everyone has been trying to buy a bike. So obviously we're good friends with the shop. In our shop, it's literally almost has nothing in stock. It's kind of funny to see that happen with so many people trying to buy bikes. But it's been nice to see so many people out and looking to get out in any form, not just on trail versus off trail. And so it's been good.
Thank you, Elizabeth. What tell us a little bit about your riding this summer? Or have you been working too much?
Yeah, so it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Working from home, we end up working much longer days, which is ridiculous. But then it forces us to insist on going riding. So yeah, as Sean said, like they closed one of the roads so we can do some road riding on rainy days when it's wet. But we've been able to just, instead of use the car, just use our bikes to get to this Belmont Plateau, which we haven't actually ridden too much for I don't even know why.
Previously, yeah.
Because it's really an awesome trail. So yeah, but I agree. I forget who said, I think it was the guy in Albuquerque, but it is a double-edged sword because I like having my own trail. And now I have to be polite and I'm like, oh, excuse me. Oh yes, go by. But which is fine. But it is funny because we're used to being by ourselves. So it's been good.
Excellent. Hey, Ernie, you're from the East Coast. Ernie Rodriguez, a board member, and is in the Washington D.C. area. What are you guys seeing? That's a busy place.
Yeah, I noticed that Dave and I are both on. So if I miss something, Dave, you fill in. So we've had tremendous usage. We've actually made it one of our goals to connect with new trail users, because we think that is a long-term strategy, is to gain new supporters, new users, be welcoming and inclusive, and connect with them. We've done some things to do that. We've increased membership, obviously, by putting signs up on the trail, but really it is a joy. I mean, just last night I was doing a ride and I saw a mom with 4 kids and her husband, and I mean, I thought they were doing a group ride, and I went over and said, look, can I just put some stickers on your car, and from a distance? And we talked for a little bit, and they were like, oh no, these are my kids. We belong to the NICA team, and we're here, just doing a family fun ride. It's not a practice or anything. We're just out here having a good time. So it's really, really gratifying to see so many people on the trails and then take advantage of the opportunity to connect and to grow our mountain biking community.
Oh, that's fantastic, Ernie. Love hearing stories about that. And I think probably everybody on the call has noticed how many kids are riding mountain bikes. And that's really, that's a great thing. It took a long time for the industry to make bikes that actually worked well for kids and fingers reaching brake levers and things like that. But there's a huge insurgence of kids riding bikes, which is just fantastic. Here, let's do at least one more in this segment. Marlene and Dave Campbell, I think from the Carmel area of California. Do you guys have audio?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Marlene, how are you doing?
Good, but you have me on the wrong coast. We're from the Philadelphia area.
I'm sorry.
Hi, I don't have my video on, but hi to the Sweeneys, yeah. But yeah, we saw a lot of people out on trails where, to the point where you could almost call it overuse. I think one of the challenges is parking. Places that we ride routinely, like White Clay Creek, Middle Run in Delaware, you get there and there's no parking available. Harmony Hill out near Downingtown. So I think one of the challenges is to get people to ride other trail systems. Like Fair Hill is about 10-minute drive from White Clay, and the ridership there doesn't seem as heavy. But I think because we're in the Philadelphia metro area, there's such a density of population that, the Wissahickon, which is probably one of the first place we learned how to ride, I call it the School of Hard Rocks. The amount of people just out on the trails, not bikers, but, walkers, and really makes for congestion. And that's where mountain bikers really have to step up and be polite and, share the trail willingly with other users, because the more people who support the trails, whatever their usage of the trail is, the better off we all are.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, it's intermission, and we're going to show a 2-minute slideshow of my recent bikepacking adventure in Southwest Colorado. Fast forward 2 minutes to skip to the next segment, Project Trail Respect. My better judgment has me going this way. Colorado Trail, 4 miles. But my adventurous soul has me wanting to go this way. Colorado Trail, not even on the board, So a little farther than 4 miles. Looks like we're gonna feed our soul, baby. Okay, so I just been feeding my soul, pushing my bike up a very steep rocky trail. Yeah, my soul is fed. I don't think I'm done pushing yet. "24 hours later, this is feeding my soul. If I hadn't have fed my soul, I would have only gone 4 miles. I think I went way more than that, and I pushed my bike a ton. Oh my stars.
And that's actually a fantastic segue into part that I want to talk about. And it's a new initiative at Imba called Project Trail Respect. And it looks like we're getting a slide loaded there that just gives a very high level view of what it is, and multi-experience, multi-trail experience, multi-user experience is really important. I shouldn't read what I'm looking at because I know what I'm talking about, but I can't read it. It's the idea that, and predominantly, you know, we're talking about walkers and hikers, we're talking about trail runners and mountain bikers. Equestrians certainly factor in certain locations, and even motorized users. But more and more with these busy trail systems, we need to make sure that everybody walks, runs, or rides away from their experience on the trails having had a great experience. And as mountain bikers, we seem to be the most involved in trail advocacy, in trail planning, in trail design, in trail building, you know, certainly trail maintenance. Not everywhere. There's places where there are good volunteer groups of hikers and trail runners that help. But for the most part, the mountain bikers are deeply involved because the trail itself is our experience. You know, the hikers, they don't get out there and go, wow, this is a really good trail. The runners, you know, maybe a little bit, but nothing like us who have the trail rolling underneath us, underneath our wheels. It's absolutely our experience, and that's why we will be happy riding great trails that aren't necessarily in a fantastic landscape, where people may not think about, you know, wanting to go for a hike or a run as much. Then you combine that with being in a great, you know, regional, local, or you know, federal park area, and it's that much more valuable to us. So if we feel like at Imba, we need to take a leadership role, and it's on the planning side that we feel like we can have a huge impact. And that's just how, you know, a little bit what you're talking about, Marlene, and it even starts at the parking level and things like that, how people are accessing the trailheads, which users are going where. There's an example of a very busy system, the example I used earlier in Draper City, Utah. This system has 50 miles of trail. It's right in the heart of the Salt Lake Valley. It gets an incredible amount of use from everything from you know, moms and dads with jogger strollers to kids involved in mountain biking and cross-country running, right up through seniors and everything in between, and even some equestrians in there. And they've got a really good system, and a third of their trails are hiker horse only, a third of the trails are mountain bike only and directional, and a third of their trails are mixed use with, you know, possibly mountain bike only on a climbing trail, for example, so that mountain bikers can go up the trail to get to some of those those trails that then descend. And from all indications, this works really well. So we want to study this system more. It's actually a system that Imba designed 8 or 10 years ago. So Imba has had planners and designers that have been working on this for a long time. People that came way before me, a gentleman named Joey Klein, probably one of the foremost trail gurus out there when it comes to planning, designing, and building trails. So it really speaks to that. Other elements of Project Trail Respect are just really doubling down on the rules of the trail and creating a new ethos around the rules and really trying to position them less as rules, because sometimes people are just averse to being told, here's what you have to do, here's a rule. We don't have this, it certainly isn't fully developed yet, but best practices is probably a better way to talk about it. But it isn't just for mountain bikers; it's for all trail users. And we certainly want to triple down on the education for mountain bikers with all the new users. And many people we talk to feel like sort of the typical yielding has kind of been forgotten or not learned by new riders. I had an experience last night where I'm riding up a single track, and a lot of times I'm just polite and just get off for everybody. But at some point it felt like we really kind of got back to yield to the uphill rider. And I just, riders coming down and I don't want to say I held my ground, but I just sort of held the trail because I figured it was mine to hold, and this guy wasn't going to stop. So anyway, those kind of situations, we hear about it all the time. We need to dig into that. We need to dig into the rules of the trail, for mountain bikers certainly, and we've got some innovative ways to get the messaging out, working with local bike shops, a number of other ways that really wanted to triple down on this. And then the final piece that you see there is the EMTB, the electric mountain bike integration. And these bikes, more and more, and I know all of you guys on this call are seeing them more and more on the systems that you're at. They're on the shops of bike shop floors. They're being sold, and they're not going anywhere. And all we have to do is look to Europe to see what, at least in part, may be in our future. So Imba's position on e-mountain bikes is that we do support them on mountain biking trails when all the stakeholders, including mountain bikers, other trail users, and land managers, for the most part, can agree that they're appropriate on those trails and that we won't lose access to traditional bicycles. Additionally, we want to see the Class 1 e-mountain bike category, and it's important. That's the only class that Imba approves of is Class 1. That it remain a distinct category from traditional non-motorized mountain bikes. So we don't want to see them combined into one single category for management. So we have certainly some, and we also don't actively advocate for e-mountain bikes, but at the same time, we can't just stick our head in the dirt because these things are only going to become more prolific. So we need to really find out how we can integrate them where appropriate into our trail system. So that's Project Respect at a very high level, and we're excited about the opportunities. A lot of Imba's work can find a place, and there's common threads in Project Trail Respect as we dig into this. So we're excited about the opportunities here. And with that, I would like to turn the mic over to our CEO and introduce Kent Mcneil. Kent Mcneil was on our board for several years. He owned a number of bike shops in the Midwest, Omaha, Kansas City, St. Louis. He's got a wealth of experience in leadership, management, administration, team building. He's just been a fantastic addition to the team, and he's really allowed Imba to take on a whole new life, and really excited to have Kent on the team. So I'm going to turn it over to Kent, and he's going to talk a little bit about what he's observing out there and things that we're working on at Imba. Kent?
Thanks, Dave. Hello, everybody. It's great to see you all in a Hollywood Squares format, but I'm not going to lie. I look forward to the day where we can all be having these conversations over post-ride beers somewhere. So I know we all look forward to that. And you notice Dave did not mention any skill in mountain biking. how I got the CEO title, Dave will have to tell you over a post-ride beer, but it's Chief Endo Officer, and he'll be able to really give you detail of what that looked like down in Johnson City, Tennessee. With that being said, a lot of the discussion that we've had so far is pointing to what the landscape is like right now for Imba, and it's a really interesting situation in that we're very opportunity rich right now, and to address those opportunities, we find ourselves in a resource constrained space. But I want to talk a little bit about the opportunities because it's sometimes counterintuitive, especially in the dumpster fire of 2020. That Imba would be sitting in a really opportunity-rich situation. And a lot of it's the drivers of that, as we've just heard from folks around the country, come from the pandemic forces. And, as you get more people out and more people on trails, and realizing that even driving the trails and shelter in place is difficult, people are starting to value and look for how can we build more trails close to home, better access, equity and access, and have more diverse offerings and experiences. And then you layer over that also having the situations where multi-use trails were how a lot of systems were built. And those are great until everybody shows up at the same time and tries to use them in different ways. And so that Project Trail Respect is a huge opportunity for us to address both the end user education and rider responsibility, but also start to work with land managers and look through recreation management and how do we help create these unique experiences. Because ultimately, for mountain bikers, it protects our access. If we're not alienating other user groups and creating conflict, then we're not as risk at losing access to those natural surface trails. Another driver that was going on long before the pandemic showed up is the uptick in youth mountain bike programming around the country. Many of you are familiar with NICA. They're seeing year-over-year growth, over double-digit growth, 20-30% growth year-over-year. And in addition, there's a lot of other youth programming spinning up as well. And what we're seeing with that is that the youth programming that's spinning up, these same issues come to play. Equity and access, where can they actually take these kids and teams and groups? And it's akin to starting a little league and not having enough ball fields. And so we're seeing a lot of demand from youth programming organizations looking for those opportunities. We have two pilot projects going on right now in close partnership with NICA, looking at how we go into communities. We do feasibility studies in those communities around all their green spaces, where their schools are, where their neighborhoods are. We look at connectivity and safe routes to trails that don't require loading cars on vehicles. We're looking at certainly through a lens of equity and access so that all of the schools in the community have access to be part of this programming, and that's opening up a whole nother lens of what's happened in communities around what gets developed for fitness and recreation and what doesn't happen in certain underserved and marginalized aspects of communities. So there's a lot of work being done there in hopes to create a national model that can be scaled in partnership with NICA, where we work with their Teen Trail Corps, helping kids become young stewards and advocates for trails, and also be community driven and youth informed in how we build trail systems out in their communities. And so it's an exciting project there that we're tackling in a couple of communities right now. And then the other driver, main driver of the opportunity that Dave mentioned is funding. It's also been one of the biggest barriers for trails to come to the ground. A lot of times you can have vision and plans and ideas, and they all get stalled out because they can't figure out how to fund them. And with, as Dave just mentioned, the Great American Outdoors Act being funded now annually at $900 million, that's fantastic. It's a large pot of money that also has a large number of people competing for it. And so one of the things that we're working on right now is how we work through statewide coalition formations to coordinate all the individual mountain bike groups to be coordinated and be competitive in those grant processes, not just for LWCF funding. RTP funding is one that a lot of mountain bikers are familiar with, so that we can start to leverage the models that are out there. In addition to that, There's also an arena of foundations, private philanthropy, social and environmental impact bonds, and more that a lot of stakeholders and mountain bikers aren't aware of or don't know how to access to get funding for their trails. And so we're working really hard to create leverage and unlock those sources for new trails close to home. In the effort of doing that, as I mentioned, we're resource constrained. A lot of people don't realize, but out of our entire budget, we only have about $1.5 million to $2 million that goes to advocacy and education work. And that includes across the entire ecosystem that Dave presented earlier, and serving over 200 plus local organizations. And so we've looked at that. We've looked at our own gap analysis and how we can help resource communities through that ecosystem. And we've built plans for 8 critical programmatic initiatives and identified our own funding gaps that if solved, we can really begin to unlock the public and private funding. And we know we need to build our own capacity of people in the right programs and initiatives. An example, like building those state level umbrellas that can coordinate a lot of the efforts that are happening and go after and be competitive for funding. So to say there's a lot more in there that I'd love to talk with you all about. We're quietly initiating a capacity building campaign for Imba to close those gaps. It's a time to build for Imba and create the leverage and access that's out there for new public and private funding pools. Our goal is to raise an incremental $2 million this year and next. We believe that amount will help begin unlocking tens of millions of dollars for trails. So to kind of wrap things up on my end, we're having conversations with Imba donors and many of you about opportunities to make lead gift commitments that set the stage for this successful campaign, and would invite any of you that are interested to dive more into detail around these initiatives and where we're headed to please reach out to Dave or myself to learn more. And we'd love to chat with you about your philanthropic goals and see how we can move more trails close to home to more communities more quickly and address the demand and the opportunities that are before us. So I appreciate all of you being here and would love to chat more with you as we move forward. So thank you. With that, Dave, I'll turn things back over to you.
Thanks, Ken. That was fantastic. Hey, I just, and I'm sorry, I don't use these platforms much. So I just found this chat feature, and there's some questions out there. Franklin,
yeah.
I'm going to just say, yeah, I'd love to hear from you, Franklin. Is that you?
Yes, that's me. Can you hear me and see me?
You bet.
Yeah, Dave, thank you. And I've got to run in a few minutes, but I've been looking at the chats as we were going along, and I see there is a comment about e-bikes, and I just want people to know that people's perspectives on e-bikes change. I'm 81 years old. 3 years ago, I was riding with guys in their late 20s and just kicking ass really good. I ride with 8 guys on every Wednesday, and it's a real hardcore bunch. I'm not the oldest. 2 of them are 83. But over the last 3 years, 5 of us have started pampering ourselves and bought e-bikes. So it enables us to get out and ride the terrain that we used to ride. And it means a lot to me. I don't want to be relegated to the shuffleboard quite yet. I want to keep riding. And so, you know, and I never thought I'd say this about e-bikes 3 years ago, because I was one of the hardcore ones. But, you know, as long as we're courteous, and we are, I'd like, and we get pretty good acceptance here in Marin County, and that's rare for Marin County. I mean, from the hikers and from the horseback people. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. And one other thing, just technical, I finally figured out how to get my mugshot on this I wish I could see pictures of everyone else. There are only a fraction of them that I get videos. So Dave, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Franklin. It's great. I've never seen you before. We've talked on the phone a ton, and now I've got a face to go with the voice. Russell, I see a chat from you. I'm going to give you the floor.
One thing that I did think about that pertained to the Great Outdoors Act, and that's something we should all be cognizant and aware of. Is I've watched what happens here locally in Houston, which is where I spend, I guess, the majority of my time, or have spent for quite a while. Is that when suddenly money becomes available, many parties go for it, and it can suddenly kickstart changes that as people who are interested in natural surface trail don't want. Very disruptive, very catastrophic changes to trail systems by people who don't support the same outdoor recreation that we do. And I'm watching that happen in Houston right now. And so to all that, I'd say, keep an eye out, keep your ear to the ground, and $900 million a year. That can really all of a sudden a project to build a paved trail right through your trail system. Well, suddenly there's money and it can happen. All these things that while we couldn't fund our programs, well, other people had the same situation and their bottleneck is also being released. And so just kind of keep your eye out. The other thing was in comment to, yeah, I went riding locally, 2 days ago, and it was an absolutely miserable experience. And that had nothing to do actually with mosquitoes. It was really just people and funky attitudes on the trail. Like, I almost got bulldozed by some guy, and it's like, really, it just doesn't need to be that way, So whatever we can do to try and instill that older ethos, going back a couple of decades, where it's like, hey, do you have everything you need? Is everybody good? Smile and wave on a trail as opposed to blaze by people. So there you go. That's okay. Off the soapbox, done.
Russell, that's great, and it's a good reminder that we certainly aren't going to scrap the old ethos at all, because there's some fantastic elements in there, and that is one that you certainly hit on, that there was a certain sisterhood and brotherhood in mountain biking that still exists, but maybe we don't feel it quite as much. We'd love to get back to that. Hey, Ryan Baker, if you're still on, Ryan's in Santa Barbara, and he dropped a little chat in here, and I'd like to give Ryan a chance to speak.
Yeah, thank you. I'm here. So mine was the comment about e-biking, and I guess, I spent some time in Marin, and I know similar to there, the running and the hiking community is pretty serious about staking out its claim to the turf. And I get comments. So by the way, I recognize the value of e-bikes. I ride with some friends on e-bikes, and certainly at some point, I'm sure I'm going to have one myself. I feel like, though, here, there are a lot of riders who are coming in onto the scene and onto the trails who don't have the experience, who don't know the rules of the trail that we're talking about, who are on e-bikes. They're kind of charging through, not stopping for people, not stopping for hikers. And so I will get comments from runners or hikers, essentially, well, to the extent of, you're not on an e-bike, so we're going to let you pass. You're not one of those guys, so therefore, whatever that might be. My concern is, obviously, with limited resources and trails, it does go to Project Trail Respect, and it goes to the importance of that for e-bikers in particular, but also for others. And so here we have the Sage Trail Alliance has done a lot of work on the trails, a lot of signage been put up and different things. I don't see those. I remember I used to see the sort of rules of the trail signs that said bikers basically yield to everybody and everyone else yield to so-and-so. I almost feel like there needs to be one now for e-bikers. Like, e-bikers, you guys need to yield to everyone, including people on, whatever the rule is. It feels like there's kind of a gap there, and there's an educational function that we can play for non-bikers to sort of, maybe it's even to treat e-bikers fairly, because there's obviously a large community of people who have the right to get out on trails, and if they need to use an e-bike, then they should be able to use an e-bike. But I think there's some misunderstandings out there that maybe we can address?
Ryan, those are great comments, and the e-bikes in part were what really prompted Project Trail Respect. Not totally, but certainly that was part of the conversation. I also want to mention that Project Trail Respect is just a placeholder name for now, so that'll probably get a facelift by people much further in the branding world than but for now, that's just a placeholder.
This is Jim Grover in Charlotte.
Hey, Jim.
Sorry, I got a late start here with my lack of technical abilities. Just wanted to say hi, and I was going to break in with a short story when the rest of the group was on, but a local trail that we've had it's close to where I live. It's close to home for me. Just started up about a year and a half ago, and it goes around an old farmstead, and on one of the open fields, just a small portion of it, somebody dumped about a dozen dump truck fulls of dirt. And I said, what are they doing over there? And one of the local guys in the local mountain bike club built a jump line. They actually built a progressive jump line for beginners, kind of intermediate, and then some expert jumps. And I have never seen a magnet like this any place in our trail system where as soon as those jumps were built, we've got a dozen kids there every time I'm there on the trail. And it's just been an amazing result, and it's been a lot of fun to see how many kids are getting out and using that very simple structure, essentially.
That's cool. That's very cool. That would be a bike park element.
Yeah.
Something easy to bring to communities that are constrained for space, and like you say, a magnet. I love the word magnet for kids. Probably some other young folks as well, but primarily the kids just love that. That's great.
Yeah, it has been a lot of fun to watch. I've actually tried to get out there and do that beginner line a few times. To some level of success, but I don't expect to work my way up to the what they're calling an expert line, which is they've actually got some takeoffs that are little ramps that go essentially straight up in the air when they end. But these kids just fly over those things like it's nothing. But I appreciated what Franklin said. We talk about e-bike. I'm looking forward in 10, 15 years or so to having an e-bike hopefully keep me on trails that I really like.
We're right at the top of the hour. Here's what you can help us with this winter. Please help us recruit others to the Singletrack Society this fall and winter. Be a networker in your region. Partner with us as we build the state level wide coalitions to leverage those land and water conservation funds, the $900 million. Visit with us about new projects. Visit with us about your philanthropic goals. We want to be part of your philanthropic giving, and with that, I will go ahead and close it out. The Singletrack Society is growing. You're our leaders. We're deeply grateful for your friendship, ideas, and generosity. I want to echo what Kent said. I can't wait until we're not doing these calls and we get to meet in person somewhere, and not only get to engage, but we'll also get to ride our bikes. So everybody, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time today, and we appreciate your support. Technically, this call is over, but I'm going to go ahead and hang on, and I'll continue to engage with anybody that wants to. But please feel free to get back to your Friday afternoon or Friday evening if you're further east than I am. But also, if you want to stick around and continue the conversation, I'm going to stay on until I'm the last person here.
Yeah, I was going to say that I know Dave's, and it sounds like you as well, Ken, have visited that pump track in Knoxville, kind of right at the trailhead, and to see the full spectrum of users embark upon that one is good testimony to what an asset those are to any trail community. Heck, the last time I was there, it was everything from kids to heroes to mortals to a roller derby skater who, well, they were shut down. They couldn't do roller derby practice, so she was out pumping the line and having a great time doing it. So
was she throwing shoulders into kids as she went by, or was she just practicing?
No, she was much kinder than that.
The Big Marsh Bike Park, we just heard from our contact at SRAM that apparently just lately in the last maybe several weeks or month or so, it's a huge bike park in Chicago. It's just been like the population's realizing it's there or something, and that magnet is working really well there too.
Yeah, because they just opened their asphalt pump track, and as kids came to check that out, then it got overcrowded. Then they started to overflow into the Singletrack in the park, and they started to explore further. So it's a good piece of the system to have, especially in urbanly dense areas and small pockets of green space.
I was going to expound further about what I was talking about, like on the American Outdoors Act. What are the parameters for that? Can that be used inside cities?
So, yeah, it can be used inside cities. The biggest thing that I think, as you were talking about it from your perspective, which was great insight, is that what we've identified as the, I guess, most significant way to influence where that funding goes is to be at the table on the advisory committee for the SCORP planning, which is the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. That plan, and all states do it that administer LWCF funds, informs and guides how those funds get invested. And so if mountain bikers aren't at the table and part of those advisory groups for that planning process, that's where we can be left off the map, so to speak. And that's one of the reasons we talk about statewide coalitions is that, like take Texas, for example. Your local group, Hill Abel's local group down in Austin, others could go and try to be part, but if every single mountain bike group's trying to figure out how to get at the table and influence that plan, it's going to be fragmented and like herding cats, right? And so it's how do we help form these statewide coalitions of those groups, and we have some examples of where we've done this, so that there's a single voice for mountain bikers really influencing that plan for the entire state.
Well, and if nothing else, you at least get to find out what's going on and what people are thinking of, so that if it's, I'll use the phrase, probably not in the best interest of natural surface trail users, you might have an opportunity to find a way to influence the project direction, shall we say?
Yeah, you got to be there, right? You got to be at the table. So that's the
What happened in Houston is there's a flagship park called Memorial Park. It is inside Houston. It is 1,500 acres. Half of that was developed 18-hole golf course, now to be the Houston Open golf course. And the southern half was more or less, I say untouched, but whatever that means in a city of Houston, right? But it was fully wooded, about 800 acres. And probably 5-6 years ago, they got incorporated into a tax district, a tax reinvestment district. And suddenly the governing body for the park, which was the Memorial Park Conservancy, which I served on the board on at the time, suddenly they had money, like real money, millions. And yeah, not with a board full of people that are not natural surface trail users. Most of them, the southern side was far dark and snaky. And so natural surface trail users that was a totally lost experience, lost concept of an experience for them. And so what's happening in that park nowadays, yeah, not fun. So now I'm in a situation where it's actually more enjoyable for me to get in my car and drive 25, 30 minutes to a trail than it is to ride 15 to a trail because of what they're going to do to that park. And so that's kind of why I caution. And really, that was just a function of the funding dam being broken. Suddenly, all their wildest concepts could all come true. And that's why I kind of extend that caution out, just so that other people can kind of keep their eye on it. And what you talked about as being at the state level board would hopefully give people a heads up should something run particularly counter to this. In this case, we were at the table, just nobody fully understood what it meant. Well, let me phrase it. Some of the most outspoken people didn't understand what it meant and couldn't get their heads around it. They're probably figuring that out about now. Unfortunately, it's way too late in the process, but so.
That's a good point. It's good. It was a good caution because I think it dovetails with exactly what we're saying is if we're not thoughtful about how to position ourselves and advocate and educate around the value of natural surface trails, this money will be used for a lot of other things, and we won't get an equitable piece of it for natural surface trails. So,
well, it's the space itself is at a premium. Open space. Some places you got plenty of it. Other places, it's rare, and then it's valuable, and it isn't always looked at as So we need to talk, and I guess that's that Project Trails Respect has elements of that to talk about the whole experience. Trails are just part of it, and really LWCF is for land acquisition, at least in part, and then you're able to put trails on it. So it's that access piece. It really it speaks to that in just a slightly different, very acute way.
Well, the experience word you use there, I think, is a really key component because a lot of times they just use metrics. Well, there's going to be 5 miles of trail. There's 5 miles of continuous single track, but then what if I told you that was 5 miles that crisscrosses over a paved trail 5 times? Not at all the same experience, and one is much better for reducing any type of user conflict, and the other one begs for it. So point being is a lot of the people designing these wonderful ideas can work on metrics, but not the experience because it's not an experience that they have familiarity with, right? And so any ability to try and convey that to them, because that's also happening in this, that's part of what's happening and is going to happen in this park. So, hey, that everybody, Ken, thanks for that link. That would probably be a pretty cool document to shoot out to all the members of the Single Track Society. I don't know if that link was visible to all or not, just because I'm not familiar with this platform, but I could see how this document could be of significant use to Single Track Society members.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I think we'll also work to send out the Project Trail Respect in detail too, because I think that obviously is interest to a lot of folks on the call. So,
cool. Russell, thanks for being on. We appreciate it. That's 2 now.
I'm trying. But again, like Ken said, better to be at a trailhead, or at a restaurant afterwards, or somewhere. Yeah. Outside. Okay, provided you're not getting chewed alive by mosquitoes.
Right.
All right, everybody. Have a great weekend.
All right, that's a wrap. Hope you enjoyed it. Looking forward to talking to everybody soon. Have a good one.